Hello, everyone. Going to give everyone a few minutes to kind of join in with us here. We're a few minutes early. Hope everyone's well. A little housekeeping. If you are logged into YouTube, you can click on comments, and you can go ahead and tell me whatever it is that you wish to tell me. Ask questions. Tell me where you're from. Wherever. So, all right, 2 minutes to go. We'll go ahead and wait a little bit. If somebody's out there that's logged into YouTube and can send a message, that would be awesome. So I can see if this works. I'm not super technologically inclined. Hey, all right. Got it. Fantastic. Awesome. It works. Can everybody? All right, I'm going to assume so. Let's go ahead and start. Hello, everyone. My name is Jimmy Videle, and this is the Veganic Growers Hour. We are live in Boileau, Quebec, which, as somebody has already asked, we are about 1.5 hours northeast of Ottawa and 1.75 hours northwest of Montreal in the province of Quebec in Canada. Looks like I have one person from Calgary, another couple from Nova Scotia. Very, very cool. Thank you for joining us. If you would like to send a comment, anyone, please do so. And I will mention you, somebody else from Ontario. Thank you so much for joining in. Here to this today, tonight it is -11, which is about 14 degrees Fahrenheit for my friends from the United States. So it's chilly with about 60 centimeters of snow on the ground. That's about 2 feet. So it's cold. And even though we're hoping for an early spring, we're not sure we're there yet. So anyway, thank you again for joining me. This is great. Tonight's show is the number one of 20. We're hoping to do a 20 episode program. We're going to follow the garden season. So every other week, there's going to be another topic that we're going to be discussing. So tonight's topic is on garden planning, your calendar, your maps, and all about seeds. So we're going to get into all of that. All right, so let's go. If anyone had been able to take a look on Facebook this morning, I went ahead and shared in the discussion section a bunch of maps and calendars and sketches, and it's all pretty elementary and it's all hand drawn. That's about what I can do with stick figures. But if anyone is interested in taking a look as we go through this first part of the show, it might help you. But if not, that's okay too. We're just going to go ahead and start. So when you're considering your veganic planting season, you really want to know what you are trying to do. You want to have a vision for your season. Some of us have already started. We did ours back in January. Other people's are just getting going. Up here in Canada, most of us are buried under snow. So if that's your situation, then you can still be in the planning stages. And this is really, really important. You really want to try to get a good understanding of what it is you're trying to do. So maybe you are a home gardener and you just want to grow some food to supplement the food that you eat now. Or maybe you're a homesteader, someone who would like to produce all of their own food or the majority of what they eat. Or then again, maybe you're a little bit like us here at La Ferme de l'Eau, where you are a homestead that's big enough that you also want to sell a little bit about what you have. Whatever your situation is, these shows are going to be for you. This is exactly my experience. So we're going to see how all of these work for you. So in your garden plan, you should get into the habit of, after you do your map and you do your calendars, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, this is going to get us all in the habit of journaling, allowing us to be good observers at what we're doing. So when we actually go out into the field, we're going to want to be able to see what's going on with the different crops that we're growing. We want to understand a little bit better about the conditions of where we live. We want to understand what insects are. We see, we observe, what small mammals, what birds. It really doesn't matter, but we want to get in the habit of observing. And I personally feel like the garden plan, this particular planning session, gets us into that state of mind where we then can take all that information, all that sort of logistical information that we're going to be doing here in just a minute, and then kind of already have that in place. So then when we're in the field, we can actually just observe. It's a more creative time. We can think, we can see what's going on around us. We can hope that we're giving all the plants everything that we need. Anyway, that's going to be for a later show. So let's start with where we're at. There are 3 dates before that we ever plan our garden that we all need to know. Number 1, you should know wherever your region is, you should know what your last spring frost date is. Now, it's interesting because a lot of people will plant around this date, but in a lot of ways, it's really just a date that we want to move from. So more important than the last spring frost date is what is considered when the soil can be worked, or when your soil is open date. Now, usually that's going to be 3 to 6 weeks earlier than your average last frost date. And if you don't know what your average last frost date is, you can go to the Farmer's Almanac online and just go ahead and put in your postal code or put in your city, and it will pop up what they believe to be as your average last frost date. Another really good way to do that is to talk to gardeners that you know that live around you, get involved in gardening clubs that are close to you, even though there aren't that many veganic ones, but it's okay. The knowledge is there for those dates. So you have your last spring frost date, you have your when the soil is open date, and then your third date, which is even probably more important, especially when we start talking about tomatoes and eggplants and peppers and melons, even winter squash to a certain extent, is what is called the warm and settled date. Now, this date is going to be about 3 weeks after the last spring frost date. And what that actually means is when the temperature in the spring has basically stabilized at night. So you're not going to really get those drastic, well, like we do here sometimes, those 2, 3, 4 degree nights. They're hopefully going to stay above 10, 11, 12, or like a lot of the crops that I just mentioned, they really want to be about 14 or 15 degrees Celsius. So last spring frost date, as soon as the soil can be worked date, the warm and settled date. The 3 dates that you need to know before you can start your garden plan. Why are those dates important? So as soon as the soil can be worked date is the date when basically the ground is open about 30 centimeters, 12 inches. It may still be frozen lower, but that doesn't matter. The ground is open enough so that we can work the soil a little bit. There are certain crops that really like that cold temperature, like your peas, even early carrots, some of your lettuces, mustard greens. Some of that stuff can grow when it's warmer, but there's no reason to wait. If the soil is open, then you can go ahead and plant your peas. I think somebody mentioned they're from Winnipeg and their growing season is around sometime in May. Yeah, I mean, it's like here, our average frost date is May 25th. But if you look at our open date, that when the soil is open date, it's actually May 5th. So that is our earliest planting date in the field. And that is, like I said, when I plant my first radishes, my first turnips, my first peas, my first carrots. And I think you all can do the same. There's no reason to wait until that frost date for those crops. It'll just allow us to start eating our own produce a little bit faster. And a lot of those crops are also extremely hardy. So peas, not only do they not mind the cold temperatures where it might freeze a little bit, but even if you do get a drastic -5 Celsius, -4 Celsius, your peas aren't going to be affected. Radishes won't be affected. The radish greens won't be affected. Most mustard greens won't. Arugula can be quite fussy sometimes, but even then it will actually do just fine if it catches that cold temperature. So that's the thing about the as soon as the soil is open date. Now, the last frost date, that is when a lot of people, will go ahead and start planting their tomatoes, their peppers, their eggplants, and even us. When I first started here in this environment about 8 years ago, we did the same. But what we noticed is that if we waited maybe 4 or 5 days after, then the plants just tended to do a little better because they weren't getting hit with that colder temperature. Because even though that's the last frost date, it is very common we'll have 1 degree. That's pretty close to freezing. The plant, it's not going to freeze, it's not going to die back, but it's still going to sit there and not do much. So for the plants, those what we want to call the tender annuals are the ones that we will plant during the time of the last spring frost date and the warm and settled date. We really want to try and see if we can not have those plants experience 5 degrees. There was a question that just came in about, do you also factor in cycles of the moon for planting? And I will answer that in a minute. I think that's from Mr. Pardee, and he's from Calgary, Alberta, or Mrs. Pardee, excuse me, Jeannie from Calgary. So thank you for that question. I will answer that in a minute. So those are the dates. Now, there's probably something else that's even a little bit more important than those dates, and that would be what your hardiness zone is. And a hardiness zone is the zone that is correlated to your coldest temperatures of the winter. So here we're a 4B, which means that our coldest temperature will be anywhere from -30 Celsius to -35 Celsius. And why that matters is it's for your perennial crops, for your trees, for your bushes, for things like asparagus, mince, oregano, thyme. All these things can go down to zone 4. Maybe there's some people out there that are zone 3 that I don't have as much experience with. I don't think I've ever planted in a zone 3. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. You can, most seed catalogs, when you're looking at things that you would like to plant that are perennial, and you're looking at your hardiness zone, if it says that it's hardy down to zone 3 and you're in a zone 3, good, you're good. So that's what you look at. So when we talk about seeds a little bit later, that's what we're going to be talking about as far as perennials go. But the hardiness zone. So 3 dates: last frost date, when your soil is open date, warm and settled date, and then your hardiness zone. 4 things. Extremely important. If you know those 4 things already, you're golden. We can move on. If you don't know, go and find those dates. You should be able to just web search it and you will find it. And the hardiness zone, you can find the hardiness zone. There's one, I think if you just type in Canada hardiness zone or the United States hardiness zones, it'll all pop up for you. Good. So there are many ways to begin. In the past, when I was a smaller gardener and I was just growing enough food for myself, I would actually start with my map. So again, in the discussion section of Facebook this morning, I shared 6 or 7 scans of really rough scans of the 2 different options. We're going to talk with the 2 different scenarios, and we're going to talk with the first one first, which are there were a set of 3 scans, and what they are it's a garden map that shows basically a 3-foot by 8-foot garden bed and a rotation of 4 different crops. So you have your tomatoes, you have your beans, you have your lettuce, and then you have your carrots. The rotation was set because I like to have my tomatoes follow my beans. My tomatoes, in that particular rotation, the tomatoes are the heaviest feeder of the 4, and beans do put nitrogen back into the soil, which the tomatoes would like for the next year. But the rotation only matters so much for now. What matters is if you have your garden plan, if you know already how much space that you have, then you can write out, if you haven't already, a nice sketch of your plan. Or maybe there's an online there's something online that you can use, or maybe you like to do it on a tablet. It really doesn't matter. The point is to have a map. And then every year you keep that map. So then you can look at it. So instead of trying to remember years before, okay, so where did I have my tomatoes? Should I really move them around? Well, I don't think I want them in the same place because they didn't get as much sun, or they didn't do as well, or, well, then you know, because you have it. Again, it's all about observation and journaling. As we go through this entire process over the next 20 weeks, well, 40 weeks, but every other week, 20 weeks, I'm going to constantly bring up this idea of observation and journaling. So create your garden map. You can start that way, and then from there you can decide based on those 3 dates. That was 4, 3 dates. Based on those 3 dates, when you can start planting. So for here, or that particular example, I was using the 24th of May. Let me take a look at this. Yeah, I was using the 24th of May as a transplant date, which is right around our average last frost date, would be within maybe a few days. But if you look at it, the seeding date for a direct seeding of carrots was the 3rd of May. Again, when the soil is open date. So that's kind of how this process works. And in that one scan, where it's a very simple garden calendar, I just list the variety, the number of seeds that you're going to need, the seeding date, transplant date, how many bed feet you have for that particular crop, and then the harvest date. There you go. Now, the dates that are really, really important when you have your calendar, because you don't want to be thinking about this. You want to be doing other things. You want to be thinking about what your soil is like. You want to be thinking about what the temperature is, how it feels outside to have your hands in the dirt. You want to see what insects are already around. You want to listen to what you hear out in the garden that you're at. You don't want to think about, okay, when was I supposed to plant? No, that's what the calendar is for. You just look at it. And if you had a chance to look at it, then I also sent over a scan of what we do here. And our calendar is about 37 pages. And every week on a Monday is when we seed, whether it's in the greenhouse, whether it is out in the field, it doesn't matter. We just decided to pick that day. So our entire calendar is set up on Monday. So on Monday, if we are, say, it's the 3rd of May and we're planting our carrots, well, it's sure that it's not just carrots that we're planting. We're probably planting also radishes. We're planting our first mesclun greens. We're planting maybe some rapini that we can eat early. Again, these crops that we can go ahead and plant that don't mind the colder temperatures or can be planted as soon as the soil can be worked. So bouncing from the small calendar and the small map to sort of the more homestead or homestead slash market farm calendar, and it doesn't matter if you're a homestead and you just want to grow as much of your food as you can, well then this particular situation works too. And what we like to do is we like to kind of envision what we want to eat starting every week. So in the scan, there is, say, week 1, and this would be week 1 in this particular case of our sales season, which would start the 27th of June. We believe that we can have ready for our customers lettuce, mesclun, bok choy, green onions, radishes, turnips, kohlrabi, kale, garlic scapes, summer squash, rapini, cilantro, and maybe another kind of verdure, another kind of green, mustard green, like mizuna would be one, or komatsuna, which is an Asian green. These are all very nice and they don't mind the cold temperatures either. So when we do it like that, then what we have to do is then we have to work backwards. So let's say that we want to eat, just for this example, we want to eat also starting the 27th of June. We can eat earlier, but let's just say we want to start then, because this is the example that I have. Well, then for, say, mesclun, we're going to want to count back 4 weeks to plant our lettuce. But because lettuce and mustard greens grow at different speeds, sometimes we'll count back 5 weeks and we'll plant our lettuce seed, all of our lettuce, the mesclun, first, and then a week later, say 4 weeks before we want to harvest, we'll plant our mustard greens. And the reason is for that is that in this particular case of mesclun, lettuces will grow, say, to that high by 5 weeks, and then the mustard greens will catch right up to them. So by only planting 4 weeks. But if you plant them at the same time, or if you even plant them together, what ends up happening is, here is your lettuce, here's your mustard greens. The mustard greens like to crowd out the lettuce. Sure, the lettuce will still grow, but the mustard greens will get really, really big and happy, and you'll have these really huge, beautiful mustard greens, but then have really tiny lettuce. And there's nothing wrong with eating just a mustard green salad, but it's kind of fun to eat both. So there you go. That is a little bit about how it functions. Go to the Facebook discussion, look at those sketches on your own time. And it's on the Facebook event, the discussion. And because I'm here for you, this is the point. If you have any questions about anything, then send it to me after the show, and I will go ahead and answer your question specifically. During the show, I have a topic that I'm rolling through and some questions that have been asked before that I'm going to discuss. So what I can definitely help you do is help you figure out your own garden planning. So that's why we're here. All right. So there was a question that came over. I'm going to answer that because I have time. Do you also, this is Jeannie again, do you also factor in cycles of moon for planting? I do look at the moons, specifically because the new moon and the full moon tend to be the coldest of every month. April, May, June, they always are cold. So I do look at the moons. I don't use a biodynamic calendar to plant. I don't follow the phases of the moon, only specifically because there are certain dates we are trying to hit to be able to satisfy our customer base. And it doesn't always fall with the moon. If you like using the moon and you like using the moon cycles and it seems to work, I think, if memory serves me, I've done some research on this, that if it's a new moon, it's the root crops that prefer. So if it's the new moon cycle, which would be the time going to the new moon, like the week before and then on the new moon and a few days after, then you would want to, that's when you would want to plant your root crops, because with the new moon, the energy goes deeper into the earth. I believe. I think this is what it is. If I'm wrong, somebody can tell me. Then with the full moon, that's when going to be your crops that are already up. So this is going to be for basically everything else, your greens, your tomatoes, your eggplant. So like on a full moon, going towards the full moon, a few days after is when you would want to start getting your transplants in. That is what I believe to be. Now, somebody else out there for sure is a better expert on biodynamics than me. But Jeannie, that is to answer your question. I do look at the moons. Oh, and that does bring me up to an interesting point. Wherever you live, where you have a frost to frost season, meaning that you have a first frost in the spring, last frost in the spring and a first frost in the fall, of the full moon and the new moon, usually it falls right around your frost date, or maybe even, unfortunately, sometimes a week after. And definitely then the new moon or the full moon will be 2 weeks after, whatever that date is. Those are nights when the weather, the cold temperatures can plummet. So what's more important, if you're really looking at it from your own eating purposes and you're not trying to sell, sometimes it is better just to wait to plant your tomatoes, your eggplants, your basil outside, your melons, your winter squash. Wait until that warm and settled date, which is just a couple of weeks after, or about 3 weeks after the last frost date. So that's usually better, because when that new moon comes in, and it happens to come in like right in between, say your last frost date is the 24th of May and it's about the 5th of June, the new moon or the full moon comes, it is almost assured that it's going to get really, really cold. Almost assured. Here it's been every year. We watch that like a hawk. So when we plant, that's what we think about when we're looking at those times. After that, you're pretty safe. Once you start getting to end of June, first week of July, it might get cold, but it shouldn't freeze. And that's what we're worried about. Okay, that was our first question. I have another question. This one I think is a fantastic question. This is from Ryan. Well, Jeannie's, yours was really fantastic too. Ryan from Columbus, Ohio asks, I wish to have an urban garden where I grow in multiple areas and grow most of my caloric needs. What should I grow and how much space will I need? Excellent question. So here's my answer. So here in Boileau, I have done this research. I have calculated how much land we would need in square feet to grow each one of us. It's my wife and I who run our farm, La Ferme de l'Aube, here in Boileau. How much land we would need in square feet to feed one of us. Basically, all of our needs during the growing season, which means every vegetable and herb and some flowers, fruits from A to Z. So from artichoke to zucchini. And I have come up with a calculation that it takes about 3,000 square feet to grow enough of that, to grow enough food for one person. This includes about 150 square feet. I won't go through all the square footage numbers. If you are really, really interested in this, I do have all the different crops and all the different square footages, but it'd be too long to talk about here. But just for an idea, there are certain crops that are very interesting in this calculation. So this would include all of my dry beans. We grow all of our dry beans here. This would include corn. We grow sweet corn because we prefer it to growing milling corn. But if you decide that you want to grow milling corn, and in the future we will grow milling corn, but for now we grow sweet corn that we freeze. You can grow milling corn also in exchange of that, to put in that 3,000 square feet. Excuse me. We also grow flax, which is really, really high caloric. And that was his question, I believe, was that how do I grow most of my caloric intake, right? Potatoes, we grow all of our own potatoes, sweet potatoes, winter squash, and another one of my favorites is green peas. Snap peas are awesome, snow peas are awesome, but English shelling peas, the one that you let get quite plump and you pop them off and you can eat them fresh, or you can freeze those are fantastic. And they're also a really good protein source, as well as they are a fantastic fantastic for your calories if you're looking to build your calories. But it's not just about calories, and it's not just about proteins. It's also about getting all your vitamins and minerals. And even though broccoli does have protein, I don't really think about protein when I eat broccoli. I think about that it's a brassica family and it's in the leafy green family, and I'm getting all my phytonutrients, and I'm getting my vitamin K, and I'm getting my folic acid, and I'm getting all the leafy green goodness that I'm getting from kales and Swiss chards. I'm going to get that in my broccoli. Things like cabbages are fantastic, especially, and we're going to talk about preservation at the end of this 20-week program, especially if you make sauerkraut or kimchi, because that creates the process of making sauerkraut and kimchi increases the levels of vitamin C, which in the winter times we need. I would also, Ryan, grow all my root crops. I would grow carrots, beets, rutabaga, celery root. So much easier to grow celery root than celery. I would go ahead and put that into your plan. Alliums, I would plant onions, green onions, leeks, garlic. Garlic you'd want to plant in the fall, but if you want to plant spring garlic, you can. And of course, as many different kinds of tomatoes as I can. The particular purpose of having this 3,000 square feet of urban garden or backyard gardens or on a homestead situation, a farmyard situation, is to have as much diversity as possible. So when we're considering it all, we would like to plant in those urban patches that Ryan's doing, or in your own gardens, we want to plant our perennials that come up early. And a lot of the perennials they'll be some of the first things we harvest. So here we can plant perennials like sorrel. We can plant perennial green onions. We have a Japanese green onion that we have that's one of the first to get ready here in early May. Mint and lemon balm. We also want to be harvesting oregano, chives. Chives are really, really fast. But my favorite of all the vegetables that come early in the season is asparagus. So if you can find yourself some good crowns of asparagus, you can start it from seed. I've never personally done it, but if you can find some good asparagus crowns, go ahead and plant your asparagus. That's going to be really great. Looks like we just had another question come over, so I'm going to answer this. Hello, it's the first time I'm going to use an unheated greenhouse this season. How do I calculate when I can sow inside the cold-tolerant plants and cold-sensitive plants? Any tips? Yeah, so your unheated greenhouse at night is going to be exactly the same temperature as it is outside at night. Now, during the day, obviously, it's quite warm. So this is going to be something I'm going to touch upon a little in a couple of other shows. But if you're in a point right now where you need to plant that, you can use, again, your date, which is when your soil is open date. And the great thing is about an unheated greenhouse, and we do the same thing here. We have a greenhouse and it's unheated. I mentioned before that we plant our first mesclun on when the soil is open date, and that's about the 5th of May, right around there, 3rd, 4th, 5th of May. We plant our greenhouse, our unheated greenhouse, our bed of greens for us to eat the last week of March. So because of that heating that happens from the unheated greenhouse, it warms up the soil quite a bit faster. You don't have to heat it after that. It's already warm. Now it is going to be cold. So if you do plant that early, my recommendation is to find kind of a polypropylene row cover. What us market gardeners use to get crops in early. We are going to later also, but find one of those, and then it'll just keep the little seedlings a little warmer at night. They can tolerate down to -4, -5, -6 degrees, but they would prefer to have just a little bit more. But again, a great thing about and again, we're going to talk about all this, but the great thing about any kind of unheated greenhouse or polytunnel that closes, or caterpillar tunnel, which we have a couple of, or even just a small tunnel that you do outside that would have plastic covered or would have a row cover covered, it blocks the wind chill. And this is something that I didn't really think about in places that I grew before, but the wind chill acts just as cold as the freezing temperature, actually even worse. I've had broccoli plants that are supposed to be hardy down to -3, -4 degrees, and I set them outside in a transition environment before I put them in the field. And because of the wind chill, even though they were covered, because of the covered with a row cover, even with the wind chill, man, it just froze them. It froze the little seedlings. I was shocked. And the wind came up from underneath because they were on a pallet. Anyway, in your unheated greenhouse, perfect. Go ahead and plant it early. So how do you calculate? Go ahead and put your hand in the dirt. If it's down, and you'll know when you go in there and here pretty soon, if you could tell me where you live, I think it's Shimmick. Tell me where you live, and that would help me a little bit. I'll come back to you when we get there. But there, I hope that makes sense. We are going to talk about that. I'm a big fan of unheated greenhouses. I'm a huge fan of having caterpillar tunnels. If you have any space at all, I would put one. They can be small. You can do it with metal hoops, a piece of plastic that you can find recycled, just wants to be clear. And you can leave it on while your little seedlings are sprouting, and then you pull it off during the day. Nova Scotia Zone 5B. Yeah, so there you might be able to plant even earlier. I don't know exactly what your last frost date is over there, but calculate back. So if I think about it, calculate back almost 2 months, and you should be able to start planting. You might even be able to start planting even earlier than that. It really depends on how much sun you're going to be getting. So it's going to be any time here in the next couple of weeks for you guys over there in Nova Scotia. Go ahead and see how warm it gets inside. Get a indoor-outdoor thermometer, and you'll be in really good shape. Last frost date, 16th of May. Yeah, so I would think that you should be able to plant your greenhouse for your coldest plantings, whatever you want to plant there, by probably the 20th of March. Give it a shot. And your cold sensitive plants, any tips? Yeah, cold sensitive plants, I would wait until that frost date, maybe a few days before, unless again you can cover on the inside of the greenhouse with a row cover. There you go. Answer your question. So, like I said before, if you have any questions on anything to do with garden planning, we don't have hours and hours and hours to talk about everything. So, unfortunately, go ahead and send me your questions over the next 2 weeks. I'll be more than happy to answer. And I will give you the next topic here at the end of the show, and you can ask your questions about that too. Those I won't answer on email though, or on Facebook. I will go ahead and answer that on the show. To seeds, one of my favorite topics. So we're also happy when the seed catalogs come rolling in, and usually they come in around late December, January, and they have all those beautiful, beautiful colors and varieties. And anyway, it's one of my favorite things to do. Sit on the couch, watch the fire, look at the seed catalog. So I'm going to discuss a little bit about what are the seeds that you'll find when you look in a seed catalog. So there's really we're going to discuss two different kinds. You're talking about open pollinated, which includes heirloom, and hybrid. Now, within the open pollinated and hybrid, you can have organic, veganic, and also non-organic, which they won't even say, which you can assume is just conventionally a seed that has been raised, that has been collected from a conventional plant. So let's go back to OP, open pollinated, and what that means. So an open pollinated seed is from a plant that is true to its source. So if you have a brandywine tomato, which is also an heirloom, then that brandywine tomato will set a fruit, and that fruit will contain brandywine tomato seeds. If there isn't cross-pollination, we'll get back into there later. Tomatoes almost never cross-pollinate, but we're going to come back to that when we talk about seed saving. For this example, open pollinated means that it is an open pollinated source. So it means that the seed is produced from itself. Hybrid means that in a breeding situation, usually in a laboratory or in some sort of controlled laboratory, greenhouse, controlled greenhouse environment, a plant breeder is trying to take some qualities from some plant. I like to use broccoli as an example because a lot of broccoli seed is hybrid. They will take the qualities of one plant, say what they're looking for is, say, something that a broccoli that can be stored for a long time, that can be shipped. Okay, that's what I was looking for. Sorry. And then what they wanted to take is, so they take, say, one plant of that, and they take another one, and say that one is one that is resistant to cold. Okay, just for an example. So then they'll take two plants, and through the flowers they'll cross, and they'll create a hybrid plant. This is the seed that they will sell as a hybrid. So there you go. What's better with that? So an open pollinated plant. So if I plant an open pollinated tomato, like brandywine, then I can go ahead and seed save from that brandywine tomato. I can take the seeds out, I can dry them out, and the next year I'm going to plant, and I have about a pretty much 100% chance that it's going to become a brandywine tomato. A hybrid, if I let the broccoli, now broccoli is biennial, so if I let the broccoli go to seed, then I'm going to harvest those seeds in the second year, and I'm going to plant them, but I'm not really sure what I'm going to get. I might get the one parent genes, which is the broccoli that is good in storage, or I might get one that I might get the other parent that is resistant to cold, or I might get some other Frankenstein. I don't even know. Like sometimes you won't even know what you get. And if you happen to have more biennials, more broccolis in the same place, then there might even be more crossing. Anyway, that's not the point. So what's better? What's better for a gardening perspective? What's better for a plant perspective? My personal preferences is always open pollinated. Open pollinated and heirloom. The thing is about heirloom is that heirloom has been a seed that has been passed down from farmers for the last 3 generations at least. That's what's considered an heirloom. So as long as it's 75 years old, then it's considered an heirloom seed. So if you think about this, 75 years ago, we're talking 1945, there were seed warehouses or seed houses, that's sure. But it wasn't such the conglomerate that it is today. Today it's a gardener. Back then it was gardeners that had a certain kind of tomato, had a certain kind of cucumber, had a certain kind of pepper, and they went ahead and saved the best ones. They looked at the tomato, they got what they were looking for. They were looking for a tomato that was red and juicy and sweet and earlier than the other ones and produced a lot, and so they would save seeds from that. Hybrids, they don't always do that. And even these large commercial seed houses, they don't always do the same thing because they're trying to produce a lot of seed. They're going to let all their plants go to seed, or all their plants go to fruit, say a cherry tomato, for example. And then they're going to take all of those, and then they're going to put them in their machine that'll kind of chop them up and squeeze out the seeds and then dry it on a rack, and there you go. And that's how you get them. But unlike us, who are artisanal seed savers, people that save our own seeds and then turn around and sell them to you all, or yourselves, that I'm hoping that you all decide to save your seeds, we can pick and choose from different plants. Say we have 7 or 8 plants of a gold nugget cherry tomato, we're going to look and see which is the most productive, which are the sweetest, which are doing better, which are resistant to disease. Even if a plant that we want to save seed from has some sort of like early blight or early wilt and grows out of it, that is the perfect seed to save from, because you know that that plant has had the knowledge of what it was like. And that brings me to the biggest reason why I like open pollinated heirloom. If you consider any seed that's been seed saved for the last, say, 20, 25, 30, 35 years, that seed, this is my opinion, however, it is corroborated by journal evidence. There is a journal article written about sort of the intelligence of seeds, what seeds know, what they know inside them. For the last 35 years, wherever that seed has been grown and saved, or wherever that, let's say Maxi Bell bush bean, a Maxi Bell bush bean, wherever it's been grown and saved from, it's going to have specific knowledge of where it was growing. So it's going to know soil type. It's going to know moisture, how much moisture was in the soil. It's going to know climate. It's going to know how much heat it had during each and every year. It's almost like the rings on a tree, how people who are super intelligent can read the rings of a tree that had fallen down, not only see how old the tree is, but see how much moisture it had, see if there was a drought, see if there was maybe some sort of insect that had burrowed into the bark, into the cambium. I think it's cambium, into the cambium. The seed will have that same kind of knowledge, and this is so fascinating to me. And by having hybrids in the mix, and I'm on a really good market gardening group on Facebook. There's about 47,000 members strong. And when I asked the question, what is better, or open pollinated heirloom or hybrid, it was about 50-50. Like, some said, I'm only planting open pollinated heirloom. It's what my customers want. Others said, I would never trust my life, my money to an open pollinated heirloom. And it's funny, when I heard that, I almost wrote, but I don't like to get into big discussions on Facebook, contradictory discussions. But in my head, I'm like, what would know better than how to grow? Especially if you save your own seed year after year after year. What would know better, the open pollinated or the hybrid? And in my head, it's like, well, if I seed save a Maxi Bell, which we do seed save from every year, we've had in the last 3 years, we've had mega droughts. We had really crappy summers, cold, wet late. When I'm trying to save the seed, dry late. We've had temperature extremes, like I'm sure you all have with climate change. Everything is in flux all the time. So we took those seeds, and those seeds have all that knowledge. Every single thing that happened. And even if the plant did get some sort of disease but grew out of it, and then I had, say, 10, and I let the seeds dry there, that's the perfect seed that we want. So what's better, open pollinated, hybrid? Me, here at La Ferme de l'Aube, we grow over 400 different types of fruits, vegetables, and herbs and flowers, and 95% open pollinated heirloom. So when you're looking through your seed catalogs, seek out those varieties. Some are a little difficult, more difficult than others. Some of your brassica family, like your broccolis, your cabbages. What I learned about growing hybrids versus open pollinated, the open pollinated brassicas will require more nutrient levels, higher nutrient levels. So you'll need more mulch, more compost. You'll need a lot more of that in your situation than a hybrid seed will. I'm not particularly in understanding why, but when I did the comparisons a few years ago between growing, say, a hybrid cabbage versus an open pollinated cabbage, I found that the hybrid cabbage just produced a bigger palm, a bigger head of cabbage. So do your own experiments. If you only want to grow open pollinated and heirloom, I think it's great. Yeah, so I think I touched upon what kind of seeds there are. When we are thinking about our gardening plans, and when we are looking at the seed catalogs, the more diversity is better. My sketches are a little, well, lame. The one is because it only has 4 crops, but the other one where it does show a garden of brassicas, it really is just a garden of brassicas, but you really want to incorporate as best as you can flowers, herbs, to bring in pollinating insects for different kinds of humidity things that it can happen. Decide how you want to function. Me, I don't ever companion plant like 1 in 1, so I don't put a basil with a tomato really close to each other. Me, I really enjoy personally planting patches. So if I have say 25 basil plants, I'll put all those together, and then maybe I'll have 15 tomatillo plants just next to them. But it's really up to you. You know, this is what it's all about. So with your garden plan, think what it is that you want. Create your maps, create your calendar so it's easy to understand. Also on that same group I mentioned, the 47,000 member group, I asked the question, how did people organize their season? Some people were like me, they do it all on paper, all on scratch paper. I enjoy doing that, and then keep it from year to year in a folder. I like to look back at it. Some people want to do it right on their phones or right on their tablet. Whatever is easier. You can put it on a spreadsheet on the computer and then print it down. Whatever is easier for you. That's what you use. Whatever you like to do, however you like to organize your life, do the same thing with your gardens, but do it. And it will just make you more efficient. It will make your veganic garden more productive. And this is really what we're hoping for you. Not only productive for you, but for all the beings that inhabit your garden space, which, as important as it is for us to grow food for ourselves, one of the number 1 rules for veganic growing is that we should be growing so that we're supporting the entire Earth's collective. That's my little mantra. Okay, let's continue. I have a couple more questions, and then there was a question that came along. I have about 8 minutes, so let's see if I can go through it. This is a question from Matt in Toronto, who was going to start a veganic farm. He asked, can you buy non-organic seeds and be considered veganic? Yeah, you can. And in Canada, we have certain options. If you're looking at it from the National Organic Standards, or say the stock-free standards, or the biocyclic veganic standards, then yes, all seeds must be organic. However, there's always a caveat, and I was certified organic and I'm certified stock-free veganic. I was certified organic for 4 years, and so I got to work with the inspectors. I got to understand the process, and I also learned about it in my first farm in Arizona too. So what I can say that is here in Canada, if you have a variety that you want, and let's say it's an heirloom brandy wine, but they don't have it organic. Let's say they only have it non-organic, and it's the only place you can find it is at, say, William Dam Seed Company. Well, then, yeah, buy that seed, and it's going to be fine. It might be raised. The seeds might have been harvested from a conventionally raised tomato plant. But then when you plant it in your veganic soil, it's veganic. It's just the way it is. And if you have no other choice, if it doesn't exist, there is also a thing about costs. Now in Canada, they say that if you have an organic option, you must buy the organic option. But because it's so expensive for us here in Canada to buy seeds from the US these days, there's customs fees. The exchange rate is about $1.26. So, you know, when we're talking a $5 packet of seeds from Johnny's Selected Seeds in Maine, with all the fees and duties, now we're talking almost $8, where we can maybe find the same seed non-organic at, again, a company like William Dam or Incredible Seeds or Annapolis Seeds, which are both from the Maritimes. I think they're both from Nova Scotia or New Brunswick. Anyway, they are Nova Scotia. I think they will have those seeds for you, and the price will be a lot cheaper. So there's a question. There's your answer, Matt. Yes, don't worry about it. Buy your non-organic seeds if you can buy organic, or better, veganic. Then you're going to be better off. So next question. This is from friend Megan from Quebec City. Where can I buy veganic seeds? So my friends have a website called the Veganic Agricultural Network. And in that, they have an article called Sourcing and Saving Seeds. And in that listing, they have about 5 or 6 companies, 3 in Canada, 3 in the United States, that are or are hoping to sell their seeds veganically. Now, like us here, La Ferme de l'Aube, we're a Canadian artisanal veganic seed company, as well as small farm, and we can send our seeds anywhere in Canada. So that's fine, but we can't send to the States. We can't send to the US. So if you're in the US, I know of one called, off the top of my head, it's from North Carolina. They just started, they're called as Ahimsa Seeds, which I love the name. And you can order from them and they'll ship to you in the United States. So there's also another one that's in Ontario called Pie Bird Sanctuary. And there's another one that I believe is called West Coast Seeds, maybe. And they are going to be announcing their product line 2021 for 2022. We're in 2022. They should have everything online now. With all their seeds. I haven't looked at them, but look at that article from the Veganic Agriculture Network, Sourcing and Saving Seeds. 2 other questions that came over, and then I'm going to wrap it up. We just have a few minutes. From KW. KW, it'd be helpful if you tell me where you are. What would you recommend to help curb squash bugs? Is there something I should do before planting? Large organic garden, it's hard to control them once they start. Yeah, I have squash bug problems also in Arizona. Tell me where you are, KW, if you're still on, but if you're not, I'm going to answer your question anyway. The best method that I've come up with is to cover your squash plants with an insect screen. Doesn't have to be a row cover, with an insect screen until way past their flowering profusely. Now, it's quite common for us to see the first flower, usually the first male flower, come out, and we say, okay, we need to uncover so the pollinators can come in, the bees can come in, and they can start pollinating the squash. But because squash will grow all throughout the season, go ahead and put an insect screen. You should be able to find them and keep it on there. It'll confuse the squash bugs enough. What I used to do in Arizona, I was diligent about it. I used to go out every 3 or 4 days and I would pick off the adults. Where I lived in Arizona, and I had a fence that was pretty impermeable, unfortunately, but there was a lizard called a fence lizard that if I would have realized it and instead just put like a nylon fence, which is what we have here, to let the lizards through, then they would have eaten the male squash bugs. So ask around in your region, KW, wherever you are, and yeah, it's a deal. But I would try insect screen. That might work. Shimmick, answer your question. Is the winter sowing method a good way to have a jump start on the sowing calendar? You would have to kind of rephrase what you're asking me, but is the winter sowing method, so sowing in the winter time? Again, what we do here is we grow greens in the fall. When it starts warming up, then they start growing back. So we plant spinach and kale in, say, October. And here in about a week, we're going to start getting back the kale and the spinach to come. And then again, we plant around the end of March. So, but go ahead. I have about a minute left, and I have some housekeeping stuff to do. But Shimmick, if you want to Facebook me at Jimmy Videle at my Facebook page, I would be more than happy to continue that conversation. Resources. My friends have a course called the Lunar Veganic course, and it's starting February 9th. If you are really interested in getting a really in-depth 7-week crash course into veganic growing, it starts February 9th. They still have spots available. There's going to be every week. There's 2 hours of discourse by Megan Kelly and Stefan Grolot, and then once or twice a week, they're going to be doing question and answer shows. So check that out. Learn Veganic's awesome. The Vegan Agricultural Network is awesome. The Vegan Organic Network is awesome. Veganic Permaculture is awesome. There are all places online. I'm going to run over about 30 seconds. Sorry, everybody. Thank you for joining me tonight. If you have any questions, send them to me. Next time, episode 2, February 17th, will be on seed starting, inside, outside, in the greenhouse, meaning outside in the greenhouse or inside your house, as well as the veganic growing medium. This is the key to it all. How to grow your little seedlings veganically, what they're going to need, everything they're going to need. I hope to hear from you and have you tune in next time. Peace and have a great night.